It is day 2 of the 2013 PSG Conference at Sun City. With me here today is Nicky Newton-King, the Chief Executive Officer of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Nicky spoke earlier this morning just around some of the sort of macroeconomic issues affecting South Africa and the global economy. Nicky, you touched on just the sort of voice of business in the current political dispensation, and just that after Mangaung, stuff is clearer, but it's still not settled, and business has not yet found a comfortable voice. What do you think business should do differently in terms of engaging with government over policy?
I think business has got to engage with a positive mindset. I mean, there clearly is an intention from the government side for us to grow this economy. And what we need to do as business is to make sure that our voice is heard on those areas of policy that need clarification, that would help us do our bit in growing the economy. And I think that positive engagement, that collaborative mindset is, I think, something that we really should be very careful to make sure we live to. It's important that as policy is not as clear as it should be, that we make the point that in order to encourage investment in this country, whether that is from afar or by ourselves in the future of this country, you need to know what the environment is, the policy environment is within which you're doing that. Now, I think there's a role for a single voice of business, because it certainly cuts down the noise with which policymakers have to engage. But there's also a role for each of us, individually and as companies, to make sure that when things are not as clear as it should be, that our voices are heard.
The African growth story has, of course, been dominating media headlines for quite some time now, and you mentioned that at the World Economic Forum in Davos this year, that came through very strongly, even perhaps more so than BRICS did. South Africa obviously stands to gain from this, but some would argue that we are losing out to countries like Nigeria, like Mozambique, who are attracting a much bigger share of FDI. What are your thoughts on that? Are we still the gateway that we always have been?
Well, the first thing is, I definitely think the Africa story is here to stay for a very long time. In fact, Davos started that conversation so very sharply, but at the recent World Economic Forum in Cape Town, the Africa Summit, it was extraordinary. The positive stories about growth, of things that Africans are doing around the continent to make the continent grow. Now, the truth of the matter is, South Africa is an elephant on the continent. We have the most advanced economy. We have enormous things in our favor, but our growth rates are lower than the growth rates of our peers on the continent, which means that an investor is going to look at those continental opportunities as offering more for their investment than potentially South Africa. Now, for me, that's something to note, but not to be scared about. This means that we are competing for investment. It means we've actually got to look very carefully at how we use the very significant attributes that we have in this country. Good legal system, good financial system, very good resources, passionate people, and you can continue. We use those in a manner that actually does contribute to the African growth story. Now, we don't have a divine right to be a gateway for the continent. You have to earn that space. And so I think there's quite a lot of work for us to do in using our core raw materials, in people, in assets and the like, making those actually work so that we can, in fact, use that as a platform to channel investment up the continent. And you can see enormously successful South African companies doing incredibly well on the continent. But there's much more that we can do.
And another opportunity you touched on was just the potential in South Africa's own middle class, which of course has come under quite some financial strain recently with rising, costs of living and fuel, etc. But you said that there are massive opportunities there to capitalize on, and a lot of advisors are not seeing that. Could you just talk a bit to that?
Yes, I mean, I think the reality is that as the demographics shift in our country, and they will shift as you find more people going into the workplace, and yes, is there an enormous amount of disposable income? Possibly not, but that's an evolutionary issue. And my thesis would be that we actually should be talking to the new emerging middle class before they are asset rich, etc., helping them to actually become the type of investors that will be responsible, that will be able to grow the really substantial, sustainable wealth that Yanni Mouton was talking about this morning.